Thank you, Commissioner. This past weekend, 400 people in my little town marched for Black Lives Matter. This is a transformative moment. And I have to be able to look at them and say, you can trust that your voice is being heard around the world, that change will happen. And for you, to your officers, you need to be able to tell them the morale of the force will be strong when we deal with issues that are completely unacceptable in a transparent manner. So it really comes to the moving beyond the good words to actually clear actions that we can point to. So I want to ask you just a few questions on that, because when an incident occurs, we need to know that the process in place can deal with it, and whatever the result of that is, we can hold it up and say this was the investigation. So I did meet with the Coulton Boushie family, and I learned a lot. I learned about the trauma the mother suffered, where she was basically treated like an accomplice when her son was dead, that the evidence and the body of the boy was left out in the rain for 24 hours, which made the case, it wrecked the case. That there were RCMP on a Facebook group saying Coulton Boushie got what was coming to him. These were the allegations that we saw that came out in court. So the Civilian Complaints Commission looked into it. You have the report, but when I speak to Indigenous advisors in F Division, they haven't heard anything about what the RCMP thinks of it, what they're going to do about it. They say it's like dealing with a black hole, and that black hole is about the lack of trust. So when is that report going to be released?
Well, they started the investigation in 2016. We received the report at the end of January 2020. They put a lot of thought into that report and into that investigation, and it is very important that we do the same when we look at those recommendations. I personally have read the report already. Usually I wait till our analysts go through it and do a sort of a scrub down of, but I wanted to put my attention to it early on so that there would not be unnecessary delays, because often what happens is we look at it, we see what we've done and what we can do, and there's a lot of work, and do we agree with the recommendation or don't we? I personally looked at the report. Most of the recommendations I see no issue with, and it will make us a better police agency because of it, and my goal is to have that report out in the fall.
Okay. Because let's talk about another report that came forward, and this was in New Brunswick 7 years ago with the RCMP heavily militarized response to the First Nation community defending themselves against the fracking. And I was very shocked, because I've dealt with Indigenous protest in RCMP, and seeing sniper crews with sniper rifles was something that I found really shocking. A report was done. That's 7 years ago. The report, I believe you've had it for most of your tenure. When is that report going to be released?
The report is no longer with the RCMP. It's with the CRCC. We are finished. We have done a review, and the CRCC got it a couple of weeks ago. Okay. There's lots of, like I said, there's a lot of recommendations in that report. Again, that report was investigated over 6 years. There was 2 or 3 terabytes of information that had to be reviewed. So we wanted to make sure that we did the proper review, because people deserve that.
I get that. I guess the issue is that we saw with the Wet'suwet'en a repeat of what happened in New Brunswick. Again, RCMP heavy militarized with sniper rifles, targeting unarmed protesters. And in the reports that we saw from the duty commanders that talk about the need for a lethal overwatch. So to have a discussion about demilitarizing and de-escalating when people are being confronted with sniper rifles, the exact same pattern that we saw in New Brunswick, and the New Brunswick report's still not out. There's been nothing done on the Wet'suwet'en. How do I go back to Indigenous communities and say, no, this is not an occupying force that's going to threaten you if you stand up for your land? Sniper rifles, lethal overwatch, is that not representing something that is much more militarized than necessary in dealing with a nation-to-nation relationship?
I can say that our response to the Indigenous protests in northern BC, there was very there was no use of force used on people. People were
but the
arrested.
sniper rifles,
It was unprecedented.
would you suggest that that's okay?
The work that we did with that community and connecting with the hereditary chiefs, and we had actually lots of discussion, and it was very operationally, it was a success.
So, but then why was it the need, quote, for lethal overwatch? Lethal, the definition, is causing death, capable of causing death.
When we use certain types of resources, for example, when we had public order individuals, they are unarmed. So they have no arming. So we always, just in case there is something that happens or goes sideways, they need to be protected. So that
Well,
they
certainly,
have
but isn't that the
what's
difference
called
between
armed
a sniper watch and just police having their normal sidearms as you would have at a normal event?
The specialized team, the emergency response team, was in the background. There was armed members in their uniform overwatching that incident.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Mr. Morrison, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.